What's up, guys? I'm LQ. This is the LQ Review. Thank you so much for joining me right here at my YouTube channel. This is where I talk about all the geeky, nerdy stuff that I love to talk about: movies, video games, comic books, TV shows, and it's the day after Thanksgiving. So, being the day after Thanksgiving, and given the fact that Christmas kicked off yesterday, I got my Dwight Schrute shirt on here. Fact: Christmas is here. So, gotta rock that today. Right now, guys, I want to talk about Episode 7 of Season 3 of Star Trek Discovery. And this episode was titled Unification III. And just let me say, the first thing I thought of when I saw the title, obviously this is a callback to the Unification Part 1, Unification Part 2 from The Next Generation, where Leonard Nimoy's Spock teams up with Picard and Data to try to reunify the Vulcans and the Romulans. And it's something that Spock worked on, you know, in all of his later years. He worked on it until eventually he ended up transporting himself into the past of an alternate reality. When I saw the title, Unification 3, I rolled my eyes. I rolled my eyes and I said, here we go. They're back in the box. They went way in the future and things were going really well because they didn't have to worry about going outside that box. Now here they are. What did they do? They put themselves right back into that box where they can screw things up and make things not feel like authentic Star Trek again. And that's what I was thinking. I was thinking, great. This is going to be horrible. And not only is it going to be horrible, but it's going to be tarnishing one of the best two-parters of The Next Generation. I'm happy to report that this was the best episode of Star Trek Discovery that I've ever seen. This was a really good episode for a couple reasons, and I'm just going to get it out of the way. Nostalgia carries a lot of weight, and it can be bad. Nostalgia can be bad when it's done poorly. But when it's done well, when nostalgia is used to drive a narrative, instead of just having a bunch of references thrown in there for the heck of it, which nostalgia can be very bad when it's used that way. When nostalgia is used to drive a narrative, nostalgia can be a beautiful thing. And what we got in this episode of Star Trek Discovery was some beautiful nostalgia that drove the narrative and brought Star Trek Discovery from point A to point B in one episode. So we get to see a monitor of Ambassador Spock. We get to see him on the monitor, played by Leonard Nimoy. And not only do we get to see Ambassador Spock on the screen, played by Leonard Nimoy, but he talks. He talks. He has a line of dialogue from the Unification, and they name drop Jean-Luc Picard, and they recap the events of Unification, and they fill in the gaps from what has happened since Unification to the Vulcans and Romulans coming together to ultimately Vulcan leaving the Federation. There's a lot of story there, and it all felt very organic and very authentic. And yes, nostalgia. When I watched that scene with Leonard Nimoy 3 times. At one point, I even got a little misty-eyed because Leonard Nimoy was my dude, right? And clearly, I loved that part. But then it goes on, and not only does it build, instead of ruining it or tarnishing it, it builds on Unification Parts 1 and 2. It also tells a very competent story in its own right, with Michael Burnham returning to Vulcan, and it's not called Vulcan anymore. Off the top of my head, I forget what it's called. But they renamed it when the Romulans and Vulcans finally became reunified. And she returns to the planet, and they're trying she realizes that the Vulcans blame themselves for the burn happening, and because of a experimental piece of technology that's similar to a spore drive that they have, and she actually comes to their defense, and they don't want that defense because they don't believe that there's any scientific data to support it, and they believe that what the Federation really wants is access to their experimental form of travel. That's, like I said, is similar to the spore drive. So there's a lot of distrust going on between the Romulans, Vulcans, and the Federation, and Burnham's kind of caught right in the middle, and she's actually able to invoke being somebody who was raised on Vulcan, being somebody who went to the Vulcan Science Academy. She's actually able to invoke this right from being a Vulcan citizen to where she can actually contest science with the top science officers on the planet, and she tries to prove that they didn't cause the burn, and they try to prove that they did, and it's a very fascinating episode to watch, and it was, like I said, it definitely built on unification instead of tarnish it, so that's wonderful. That being said, it wasn't a perfect episode. We see Burnham's mother in this episode, and I thought a lot of stuff with Burnham's mom was very cheesy, and a little bit too, I don't know, Burnham can be, in my mind, an unlikable character. She can be an unlikable character. I think that she's very egocentric. She's very full of herself. And when I think about the things that I say when I talk about how CBS All Access, how they don't really understand Star Trek, and they're trying to make good Star Trek, and more oftentimes than not they fail. When I think about them not understanding Star Trek, I think about Michael Burnham. She does not have the traits of a Starfleet officer, and I think that they know that, and they're actually playing on that now. Saru actually recently dismissed her as first officer. She's gone through this disciplinary process, but that doesn't change the fact that she's still an unlikable character. Not only does she not resemble what the traits a Starfleet officer is supposed to have, she's just unlikable. So for me, I really want to see CBS All Access, the showrunners of Star Trek Discovery. I really want to see these guys start to make Burnham a likable person. She's the protagonist. I'll never sit here and say she's not the protagonist. She is the protagonist. We're supposed to be rooting for her, and to some degree we are. But she's not likable. So I don't know. I want to see that change because I want to like her. But guys, this was a episode I was really worried about when I saw the title. I was like, oh crap. And it was pretty wonderful. It was pretty wonderful. It is my favorite episode of Star Trek Discovery I've seen. Out of all 3 seasons, it's my favorite episode. I said that season 3 has turned things around, and for the most part they have. For the most part, they have turned it around. It is feeling more episodic. It's feeling more Star Trek-like. I still don't think the showrunners at CBS All Access get it, but I think they're listening. And I think they're trying to get it. And it's getting better. And this episode was definitely evidence of that, of it getting better. Honoring what has come before, respecting what Star Trek is, while forging a new path. I think this episode of Star Trek Discovery did all 3 of those, and it did it well. So I want to see more of this. And it doesn't have to have the nostalgia stuff that this episode had. It doesn't have to have that, but it needs to honor the past. It needs to honor what's happened before. And it needs to, respect Star Trek and understand Star Trek. You can still forge a new path, but you got to understand, respect, and then forge. And I think, like I said, I think this is a great step. So, what did you think of this episode of Star Trek Discovery Unification 3? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your take on it. Did you like it as much as I did? Or did you think that maybe putting in Leonard Nimoy's Spock was I don't know, a little bit desperate. I don't know. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought of it. Make sure you subscribe to my channel. I put out a lot of content. Want to make sure you're up to date with what I'm doing. And as always, thank you for joining me right here at the LQ Review, where we get to talk about all the geeky, nerdy stuff we love to talk about. Until next time, we'll see you later.